All right. How about I play a little Kahoot first, though? Talk about the stuff we talked last time. All right, so first of all, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration organizations are there to protect the American worker. They develop communication standards and regulations that businesses have to follow. In Michigan, we have one that is known as MyOSHA. And the Michigan Right to Know law is that we should know, you should know, any hazardous or dangerous chemicals or solutions that you might be exposed to, and what should be done if that exposure occurs. And these are what are known as material safety data sheets, MSDS. Okay? They look something like this, and they have different sections that are there as far as what the product is, a health hazard, hazardous ingredients, what to do if if it's a spill or a leakage occurs. And just basically general information about the chemical that is there, and it's included in the package shipping when they first come. So they're actually required. They're provided by the manufacturer, they're maintained by the employer, and they're available to the employee either in paper copy or they may be online. These are some of the requirements of them. You don't really need to know this, but they should be written in English if we're speaking English. Makes logical sense. They're available and displayed prominently, and even the public has the right to them. I don't expect you to know the different components of them, but just realize that these are the sheets you would go to if there was an exposure to find out what you need to do to treat it. And we won't do that one. And we actually have them here at the college also. There's a part of the, let's see, what is this under? Macomb Current Student Resources and Right to Know. There's a statement there as far as what is available to you on the college campus. So you need to know. Yeah. Things that we would come in contact with as a respiratory therapist, certainly cleaning and disinfection, sterilizing solutions. We talked about the glutaraldehydes, talked about some phenols, some other substances. Certain gases can become harmful. Some calibration solutions for some of our blood gas analyzers. Medications, although we don't think of them as something that would be using to cause harm. Technically they can. And certain electrolytes also. We already went through those. Okay, so that's it on OSHA. Know what OSHA is, know what MyOSHA is, know what an MSDS is. End of discussion. So let's go to electrical safety. And again, we want to get a little bit of an understanding of current, voltage, and resistance, and you already know this. You don't even realize that you know it already, but it's there. Are we okay? Okay. What's the harmful effects of a current? What happens when a short circuit occurs? Talk about grounding, macro shock versus microshocks. When are patients most susceptible? And some shock hazards.
You wandered around, I finally found that somebody who could make me be true, could make me be blue. You can be glad.
Saw that
just
one
to
coming.
be sad, thinking of you. For nobody else gave me a thrill. With all your faults, I love you still. It's good to be here.
All right, so while wiping with bleach solution, you accidentally spray some bleach on your hands, what should you do? Wash them. Absolutely. What about if it gets in your eyes? Rinse your eyes out. The vapors, you want to make sure that you get out of the area and get some fresh air. So let's talk a little bit about electrical. You do work with a large amount of electrical equipment, and some of your patients can be very susceptible to even a small shock that might occur if they come in contact with equipment that's not grounded properly. Electricity is nothing more than the flow of electrons, and in order for a circuit to actually have flow through it and light up the light bulb, it has to be a closed circuit that allows that current to flow. Switches and buttons, basically what they do is they open or close the circuit. Three terms I want you to know is voltage, current, and resistance. And the units and measures that are there are volts, amperes, and ohms. This is nothing more than you've already learned, but again, you may not realize it. We talk about these things in gas flow. Pressure is nothing more than a differential from one point to another. That's what voltage is. Current, we talk about amperes, we talk about the flow of the gas, and resistance, we have something like resistance of gas flow that occurs inside the airways. We can also talk about this in terms of cardiac output, that we end up having the cardiac output being the flow. We have a resistance within our vasculature, and we have a pressure, a blood pressure that is there. So they're all built around the same concepts. And that concept really comes down to Ohm's law. And Ohm's law says that the voltage that is present is equal to the current times the resistance. Now you've already learned this when we talked about this. Right? The airway resistance is the change in pressure that you have going through a tube or across the membrane, and the flow that is present there. That's Ohm's law. So it's exactly the same process that we've talked about. When we talk about voltage, in most cases we're talking about 120 volts from a typical outlet. In some hospital applications, batteries can have a whole lot less, anywhere from 1.5 to 12 volts. Current is the flow of electrons, the rate of the flow, and when you are having a shock, or when you get shocked, it is the current that is the issue. It's not the voltage. It's actually the current. And resistance is the opposition to that flow, and between the resistance and the voltage will determine how much current will flow. High resistance is going to obviously not have a lot of flow going through it. And we use resistors in an electrical circuit to limit that flow. Electrical, when we talk about electrocution, we're talking about current flowing through the body, and the body is a really wonderful conductor. We got a lot of electrolytes in our system, and basically the body completes the circuit and provides an alternate path to the ground. So good conductors are things like wet skin, any electrolytes, as I mentioned, metals. So patients that are diaphoretic or have an IV in place where we have some electrolytes going through the IV, they're a great conductor. Poor conductors, on the other hand, are things like rubber and glass and dry skin, and this is why we use some of those things for insulations. Static electricity are basically electrons that are not directly connected, or they can flow between points that are not directly connected. You guys have all experienced this, I'm sure, at home. And you can actually even see a visible spark or an arc present. We see it a lot during the winter because of the low humidity inside the house. And we sometimes see it with defibrillation, especially with high O2 concentrations, can actually get to the point where a fire can occur, which is not a good one. The term short circuit you should be aware of. This is basically where instead of going through the expected pathway, There's an alternate pathway for current flow, and it's going to be the path of least resistance in all cases. So however it can get there easiest is how it'll do it. And that amount of current can generate some heat, and that heat can certainly damage the equipment, but more importantly even start a fire. So here we have our normal circuit. Here we have a short circuit that's occurring, and it gets to the extent that that alternate pathway now is actually blowing a fuse. Liquid spilled on top of a ventilator causes current flow via the path of least resistance through the liquid, and we end up having a short circuit situation. So if you came in contact with both ends of a frayed cord, you would be the thing through which the current would flow. Same would be spilling saline onto an unsealed panel of a ventilator. Some of the ventilators you'll notice have nice flat surfaces on. People get into the bad habit of putting stuff on top of them. And especially in the case of a saline solution, if that leaks into the ventilator, you just destroyed it because it's just short-circuited out. Circuit breakers or fuses are used to prevent from surges occurring, so they're going to melt that circuit breaker or melt that fuse prior to it actually coming in contact and allowing the current to pass through. They do it at a certain level, so when the flow of electrons gets to a certain point, it basically just bursts the fuse. And which means we either need to reset the circuit breaker or change out the fuse. Grounding. All devices we use should have 3 wires. One is a hot, one's neutral, and one's a ground. The hot and neutral wire are the two through which the electricity is passed. The ground is there as an to protect from any failure of insulation that may be present around it. So again, we should never be using a 2-slotted outlet or prong plug. We're always going to use a 3, one in a hospital, and we find a 2-slotted outlet. The other thing, and we don't have them in the lab, and I always thought we should probably get some outlets that are red in nature, but red are always designed for emergency power, so any life support equipment you have should be plugged into a red outlet, not a standard outlet. A ground is a pathway of 0 voltage going to the earth, and any stray current we would want to go through that pathway. So what we're going to do is ground all of our equipment by having something that's going to be touching the floor, grounding it out. And you can see there's a terminal that is there. Within the hospital, there's a department called Biomedical Services that's basically responsible for checking all the equipment. This includes equipment that the patient may bring from home. It should be checked out prior to them being allowed to use it, because the worst thing you can have is have this therapist standing in a liquid, like in the back of the room. And if there's any kind of a fault, that person now is at risk of being electrocuted by touching an ungrounded instrument in an electrical source. Passes right on through. 2 different types of shocks that I would like you to know. A large shock, macro shock, that'll put you into a dysrhythmia called ventricular fibrillation, which is life-threatening. Most of the time, because we have a high resistance with dry skin or not a direct line, there's that little micro shock that you, I'm sure, have experienced at some point in your life, where it finds its way, and usually it's not as much of a problem because it's such a low amount of current that is flowing. However, given the right conditions, it could still actually cause ventricular fibrillation also. And as you can see, it doesn't take much energy as far as microamperes to be able to put you into VFib, but usually those little bits amount, our skin is enough to absorb it and ground it out. And there are we'll talk more about cardioversion and defibrillation as we go along, but you can see there's a whole lot of current that's flowing through the body at that point. So, again, it's the current that is the important thing that I want you to remember. It's the current that kills you. It's either the amount of current that's flowing or a high flow for a very short amount of time. So time is a factor, and it depends upon the path that it takes as far as how easy it is to get through. We talked a little bit about this, the fact of having a patient who's diaphoretic, who has a vascular line in that has some electrolytes, other types of drains, certainly pacemaker wires. They all are there to, they are all potential to decrease resistance and allow flow much easier. This is showing that the ungrounded source is going into the patient, and they'll die. Again, then microshocks are going to be usually just due to improper grounding, and they're not usually as much of a problem unless you get a patient, again, who's electrically sensitive, somebody who's got an indwelling line. I think we've talked about that. So again, always use hospital-grade outlets, and it's true also of cooling fans. I'm not talking about a fan like we have here in the room. I'm talking about a fan that is inside a piece of equipment. When we get to that point next summer, we'll talk about fan filters and how they need to be cleaned, because if you don't, then just like your computer, it'll actually get too hot and begin to melt down. Using proper transformers. If most of our stuff operates at 120 volts, so transformers can be used to decrease that. Basically, use the proper equipment, proper plug with the proper equipment. Have it inspected, and again, that's part of the hospital's policies. Biomed will come around every 6 months usually. And if it looks like it's damaged, don't use it. Don't overload electrical circuits. We do that periodically in here when we have 7 or 8 ventilators running. That doesn't quite handle that much of a draw. And I'll never use cheater adapters where they convert a 3-prong to a 2-prong. Don't use extension cords. Keep cords away from water and walkways. Don't allow cords to be cut indoors or drawers. And one of my bad habits is when I move the beds, I always forget to unplug them. So don't do that. Don't pull plugs out of the wall from a distance. The exception being is if the equipment's on fire. If the outlet's on fire, if you were to step on a liquid, would not be a good thing. Piece of equipment has been given anyone a tingle or shock, report it. Keep all floors and areas free from liquids and spills, except for the back of the room. Do not use equipment that trip circuit breakers or blow fuses. Unplug equipment before cleaning. Logical stuff. Never touch or allow a patient to touch equipment that's not properly grounded. And don't let the patient become part of the electrical circuit. If you do come across somebody who appears to be electrocuted, you don't want to touch them. You want to kill any power that you can find using a wooden broom or wooden chair. Pull them or separate them from the electrical source and call for help. And as long as there's tests, there will be prayer in schools. Yeah, they stop there. All right, last one. Fire. Okay. talk about what is required to have a fire and how to minimize the hazards of fire. And
iremos a la 49. Llegarle por los costados, no ha tenido paciencia, no lo ha pensado bien a ese aspecto. Parejo picaba sobre la izquierda. Tira vecina.
need I say more? Okay. So obviously you're going to go through, whenever you hire into a hospital, you're going to go through an orientation talking about fire safety, because we're exposed to it, and especially since we're dealing with oxygen-enriched environments, it's just begging for problems. So let's talk about conditions. 4 things you need to know, or 4 things that need to be present for a fire to exist. You should know these 4 things, okay? 1 is some kind of flammable material. Something has to burn in the process. You have to have oxygen, you have to have heat, and you have to have this chemical reaction present. Interrupt any one of the 4 of them, and you basically put out the fire. Heat sources can be anything from matches or lighters. Removing a heat source or oxygen, that's why we put water on a fire, that's why we put CO2 on a fire, that's why we cover it with a fire blanket. All designed to basically not allow oxygen to come in contact. Oxygen itself is not flammable. It does, however, support combustion. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about oxygen as a gas. If you increase the concentration of oxygen, it will burn much, much nicer and faster. So I always want to keep flammable materials away from oxygen. This is including things like petroleum products, especially when we're dealing with oxygen that's under high pressure or in an enclosure. Now, one of the things that you will become very familiar with is using a zone valve, and there's one right outside the door that controls this entire environment. Basically, a zone valve just isolates a particular zone as far as oxygen flow to it. R.A.C.E. As far as the steps involved if you're in a fire rescue situation. R is for rescue, A is for alarm, C is for confine, E is for evacuate. So rescue means that we want to get patients and personnel out of the environment. Again, always want to feel the door if it's closed to make sure that there's not a fire on the other side. Stay low, because the smoke is going to rise, and the lower you can get, the better off you are. Move horizontally, then down, never go up. Obviously don't use the elevators. And if there's something that has a list of who the patients are, their charts, bring them with you with the electronic medical record. That's not as much of a thing. Alarm. We have a code situation, code red, and you know where the pull stations are. I believe the pull station locally here is right outside the door. C is confine. Close the doors after moving the patients. You can use damp towels under the doors or at the base of the door. And if there's oxygen present, obviously shut that off if possible. And lastly, the E is for extinguish or evacuate. Only want to do that after if it's small and confined, after everyone's saved, after the alarm's been activated and the doors are closed. And we know the fire extinguisher, and like I said, we have a fire blanket here in the lab itself. 3 types of extinguishers. One is Class A is for paper wood. Class B is for oil or some flammable material. And C is for electrical equipment. Most of the fire extinguishers that you will see do all three. They're multi-purpose. Another mnemonic that you should know is pass. You're going to pull the pin that's between the handles so that you can use the extinguisher, aim the nozzle at the base of the fire, squeeze the handles together, and sweep going from side to side to evenly coat the fire. And this is only on small fires, things that we can put out within a few seconds. Has anyone ever used a fire extinguisher? Yeah, it's one of those things that's good to know how to do. Let's see this little video here.
Hi, I'm Joel with the Bremerton Fire Department. I'd like to take a moment to talk with you about fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers are a safe, effective tool for extinguishing small fires. When it comes to fire, be smart. This fire extinguisher, which most people have in their home, will discharge its entire contents in 10 to 15 seconds. That is why we use fire extinguishers on small fires. Fire extinguishers are rated A, B, and C fires. A being ordinary combustibles such as paper and wood products. B being flammable and combustible liquids such as gas. C for electrical fires such as your toaster or blender. To use the extinguisher, remember pass. Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Pull the pin. Aim at the base of the fire, not the flames. Squeeze the trigger. And sweep at the base of the fire. Pull the pin. Aim at the base of the fire, not the flames. Squeeze the trigger and sweep at the base of the fire. Some important things to remember. Always keep the exit between you and the fire. If the fire grows rapidly and becomes too large to extinguish, exit the area. If you are inside, shut the doors on your way out. Keep the extinguisher where it is accessible. Small fires spread rapidly. In summary, fire extinguishers are used to extinguish small fires. Never put yourself at risk by attempting to extinguish large fires. Possessions can be replaced. You can't.
Good tip. And again, fire blanket is located in that red box that is there. And again, you would just go ahead and wrap yourself.
Fire blankets are a very good piece of equipment to have in the kitchen or a galley or anything like that for two simple reasons. Is number one, they won't burn, and number two is they keep away heat. So in other words, if we've got a fire and we can't get past the fire to get to an exit point, we can hold the blanket up like this and walk past the fire without getting burned. Okay? They're normally a one-use only piece of equipment. But the thing is, when you put it on a fat fire, if the fat gets impregnated onto the blanket, the next time you go to use it, the blanket will catch on fire. Other than that, they won't catch on fire at all. They're made of a woven fiberglass type material that doesn't burn. Okay? Now, because you can get them in different sizes, normally 1.2 by 1.8 metres, when you hold it up, it's normally longer than you, so therefore you can't walk in like that because you'll tread on it. So you need to walk in slowly, sideways, turn and face the fire, arms up high, step forward and put it down like that. What you don't do once you've done that is wrap it around whatever the thing is that's burning, because then you may pull it back off like that. Now what puts the fire out? Lack of oxygen. So how long are we going to leave it there before we take off? We're going to leave it there and go. Or abandon ship. So how long is it going to take to put the fire out? What happens if I go up like this after a couple of minutes and go like that?
We're going to flash over.
Why?
You might, if there's still hot embers in there that might reignite with the vapours once you introduce oxygen.
Once you introduce the oxygen. So how do I overcome this problem? How long is that going to take?
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes. What, an hour? 2 hours? Abandoned ship? What about if we go out and we turn the energy supply off? Whatever that may be, gas or electricity. That will then take away another side of that triangle, will it not? What will it take away? If you know, won't take away fuel. Fuel's still in there, right? Fat's still there. Takes away the heat. So now if we don't have heat and we don't have oxygen and we go like that and introduce oxygen, will we get flashover? Sure. No, because we haven't got that third side of that triangle. Fair enough? So don't think for 1 minute that put it on there, job's done. We now need to go and do something else to then lower that temperature. Whatever you do, don't turn the fan on that sits above the stove, because that will suck the fire up and put it in the roof. Alright? So don't do that. So let me show you the right and the wrong way to do things.
And this is supposedly a gas fire.
This is a fat fire.
Fat. But fat, you can't turn the fat off, can you?
No, but you can turn the... There's fat in there when you're cooking a roast, Christmas roast.
Fat's the fuel.
So fat's the fuel.
Yeah.
Heat is the energy source. Gas.
You're getting onto your spout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you're doing gas.
So there's our fire. Now, first thing you've got to do when you pull the blanket out of its packet is wrap your hands inside so that your hands are protected. Right? No exposed parts of your hands. Walking sideways, turn and face it, arms up as high as you can go. Straight away what happens is you can't see the fire. So you need to be within 1 step, so that all you do is take 1 step forward and keep going down. Now, see the flame, when I do that, it pushes it away, so there's no chance of me getting burnt. So if I'm halfway through that whole operation and I decide then to change my mind, watch what happens. Halfway down, change your mind. See that? It follows you. And most people do this. Oh. So once you're halfway through that situation, you can't change your mind. And you keep going down and down and down. Just keep going like that and let it go and step back. That's it. Fairly simple. You don't do what a bloke did on a course that Eric and I were doing and thought he'd be a smart aleck and go like that.
You don't.
Now, can I use dry chemical powder on that that's on fire? What do you reckon?
Which strike chemical?
Which one? There's only one. Oh, A, B, or B, it doesn't really matter. Yes, I could. What's the biggest problem with me doing that?
Blowing it out of there.
Blowing it out of there, because it comes out of that nozzle in a very small hole, doesn't it? And all that pressure is going to blow it everywhere. So we can't really do that unless you stand back and sort of let it fall down. Alright? Ever seen a dry chemical powder go off? Make a bit of a mess? So the kitchen's buggered, isn't it? Now, if you're going to put one of these in your kitchen, for goodness sake, don't put it on the wall behind the stove. Because when this thing's on fire, you can't get to the blanket. The standard says, put it on the wall at the entry so you can grab it within 4 seconds.
We love the girls.
Huh? That.
That's magic.
Yeah.
10 or so, 17.
Good.
You get the gist? All right. So again, you should always know a fire plan. Keep exits clear. where the alarm pole and the extinguisher is, and when we get done, we'll take a look outside and we'll find out where the closest one is. Flammable materials should be stored properly. When we talk about gas storage another day, there's certain rules that are followed, even related to storing of oxygen. Smoking rules, and we talked about the electrical safety also. There is a emergency preparedness that you can find on Macomb's website that you should be aware of. And if you guys have not signed up for the emergency alert system that they have, the college has, you may want to do that. They'll actually text you if there's some kind of a active shooter incident, if there's weather issues, if the school's going to be closed, whatever. So it's pretty good. So